Good evening, everyone.
I'm a big fan of that.
Thank you for coming out tonight. We really appreciate you being here. I'm Dave Turk. I'm the chair of the Richland County Board. We have various board members seated here up front, ready for tonight's presentation. We thank you all for coming in to hear this information firsthand. Before we get started, just want to stress a couple things that this has been in the works for a while. Just about a year ago, we made the decision that we really needed to know what was going on with the properties the county owns. We wanted a formal assessment done, and we put out a request for proposals. We had 8 different proposals submitted. We interviewed some of the top scoring of those proposals, and Venture Architects was selected as the vendor to do our formal assessment of the campus property as well as the courthouse and the human services building. What we're going to do tonight, it's purely an informational meeting. This is not a board meeting. There aren't any decisions being made or discussions being had. We're going to receive the information from Venture. We're getting it at the same time you are. We haven't heard any of this yet, so you'll be receiving the information just as we are. And at the end of their presentation, we're going to have a 15-minute Q&A session solely about what they tell us tonight. We're not at a point for discussing future plans or ideas or anything like that yet. In the next couple weeks, we'll schedule a meeting of our campus reconfiguration committee, and then we can start to digest this information and figure out what the future steps might look like. Tonight, it's solely about receiving the information on the facility study from Venture. So, again, thank you for being here. We're looking forward to hearing what they have to say. I'll let the presenters introduce themselves as they begin, and just thank you for joining us in here in person and those who are joining us online as well. Thank you, Dave. Oh, one more thing, if you have a cell phone with you, if you could make sure that's muted, please. And we don't have phones ringing while we're doing the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dave. My name is Kyle Cano. I am with Venture Architects, along with me is my colleague here. Corey Boyer with Venture. And I will slowly make my way past the speaker while we're working on the piece here, just so we don't get feedback. Okay, yeah, but it's still on. So just to qualify some pieces here about Venture Architects. Venture Architects, we're a Wisconsin-based architecture firm. We're out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We have worked with 54 different counties in the state of Wisconsin. So I think the best way to describe it is our bread and butter work is working with counties, working with county boards, county administration. We understand that project type and the project types that many counties have. So this was a very good fit for the county and for Venture to be able to take on this project to look at all of the properties that the county has. So as this is coming up, the other piece that we also want to communicate is we would come out, I believe, December was at the walkthrough. I'm looking at Marty and Steve here. I believe with the RFP, there was a walkthrough of all of the facilities back in December. So that's when we were able to get a chance to walk through everything and just a very quick understanding so we knew when we were putting our proposal together what we were bidding on. So that was our first blush at what everything is here at the county, and it is there's a lot of really nice qualities, good stock with the buildings. It was very exciting to want to take on this entire project. Thankfully, we were awarded the project, and then we were able to come in and start the entire process. So we have our presentation ready for you here, and we can get on with it. So we can go to the next slide, and it is just sort of an introduction relative to after we were awarded the proposal, what did we do? Okay, so with that, we have our experts. We had a list of experts of mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, plumbing engineer who also handled fire protection, civil engineer, a landscape architect, and I believe that is everybody we had on that for our list. One of the key things that is extremely beneficial for us is we use a third-party software platform as part of our process for collecting data. So as part of what facility assessments can be, they can be a very subjective report or they can be objective reports. By using this third-party software platform that we went through, we were able to help validate for the county the fact that what we are assessing here is as objective as possible. And as part of that process we have up here, it was over 1,300 data points over the 9 buildings at 3 different site locations. The 3 different site locations would be the UW Richland County campus. It was the courthouse and the block where the courthouse and jail are, then across the street where the human services, the health and human services building are. So we looked at all 9 buildings that are part of that. We did not look at the Simon Center. That was not included as part of this, just for a point. And that was all taken care of over the course of 3 days in April. So that is the background. As you can see, we have some imagery up here of the platform that we were using and how everything is collected. We have the floor plans on, and we're all using tablets as we go through. We can take photographs as we're going through. We're logging the data. We can even get into the specifics of if there's an air handling unit and there's a placard on that unit, we can take a picture of that and it'll actually read all of that data on there. So it's a very data-rich environment that we're working in. And then some of the outputs is that we can get take that data and create dashboards with that. So we can go to the next slide, please. So the process that we'll go through the buildings as we review them here will be as the buildings were identified on the plans, the original 1966 plans for the campus. We'll start out at the UW campus, and it starts with Building A. Doesn't really make sense. What is Building A? Building A is the science building, which is kind of the furthest building from the parking lot. It's the one that had the newest addition.
Come here for just a second.
Go right
for
ahead.
the sake of folks online, they're having trouble hearing because other people online do not have their mics muted. So just for our online folks, if you could all mute your mics, that will help everybody out there be able to hear. We're doing great here in the room, but it's the online folks that are experiencing some difficulty. So if you all please could mute yourselves. We don't have the ability to do that on our end, so we're all good here. Sorry for the interruption.
I'm just going to move over a little bit just so I can actually read some of the items that are on here as we go through it, but it'll be discussed. So the UW campus, Building A, science building, and if I'm in your way, I apologize. It was renovated in 2001. It was an addition to the east. It added there were some new materials. There was a lot of AV upgrades into that building, but the biggest part of that were 3 classrooms with all new labs, fume hoods. It was a very significant, and all new mechanical equipment as part of that as well. So with that, part of the west side of that building is still materially the same materials that were there from the original 1966 building. So there was maybe, we'll say half of that building was actually upgraded with that. The original bathrooms that are in there, those were not upgraded for any accessibility needs. So those still had some handicap accessibility clearance issues with that, but there was one bathroom that was added that actually took care of the accessibility part of that. A lot of the windows that are part of that weren't part of the addition, those are still the original windows. Now, I'm going to take a little pause in this. As we start going through each building, there will be a common thread throughout all of this, and that is a lot of things are the same in each of the buildings. A lot of the data points that we collected, very much the same. So we'll likely spend a little bit more time on this building, not because it is of any differing condition, but it's the first building that has a lot of the pieces. So the original windows that were put into those buildings are single pane sliding glass windows. They're not thermally efficient. They're not thermally broken in any kind of winter condition. If you were inside the building, you touch it, it would be frosted up. So The original part of that building has the original windows to it, the slider windows. The other part of that is there are some areas on that building where much of the brick needs tuck pointing. Most of the buildings have that. Anything from the age of 1966, just with our winter climate here, that is a natural thing. It is something that we should be keeping up on. Brick is a durable material, but it does require maintenance more than a lot of people think. So the other part of that is the mechanical equipment, which I mentioned earlier. All new air handling units were put into that building. It was a very substantial upgrade to that. The only thing is, those are all likely 23 plus years old and getting near the end of their life with that part of just the way mechanical equipment can be. So I'm trying to think what we else have here. With that building, we collected 173 data points. And really, the future building, if we talk about that part of it, any future use for that building is really constrained by the lab portion of that building. So if there was a need for another lab, classroom type use, that's perfect. Anything else, it would require a pretty significant renovation of that space. So you're just dealing with the 1966 shell of the building, 1966 structure. So that, trying to look at the pictures, it's kind of fuzzy in the pictures, but what we're seeing here, the door on the lower, as I'm looking at it here, the lower right, that is just indicating the accessibility clearances that are not present in the bathroom that should actually have 24 inches on the side of the pole. So that's not there. There is a crack. The brick that's in the upper right corner, there's a crack in the brick that's actually the new brick from the 2001 edition. There were some detailing issues. Water got in there. There's in the lower left picture, there's a ring scupper that's coming off. That water is actually coming down on the brick, getting into the brick, and it's not cracked, the relatively new brick. And then there is some door issues with that particular door that's shown in the upper left. That one is, the piece with that was that there was not a concrete pad on the outside, and that is an exit door out of the lab. So we can go to the next slide. So Building B. Building B is the, scoot underneath here, the Arts and Education Building. This would be the, if you're driving up to the campus, it's the furthest to the northeast. It is the smallest of all of the buildings. And with that building, we collected a total of 62 data points on that building. This building, all the way through original vintage. Nothing has really changed in here. This is probably, of the buildings we went through, the one that really seemed to be in the, for deferred maintenance, in the worst condition of everything. And with that, a big part of that is, you can see the picture in the lower right, that the flooring is starting to come up, that there's moisture in there, it's delaminating all of the floor tile that's in there. There's a number of cases where the tiles actually broke apart. And very likelihood, due to the vintage of that, we did not test it for anything, but high likelihood in a case like this, where that would have asbestos containing material either in the adhesive, in the tile, or in both. So that is just a piece that we have noted as part of this. Again, the brick, conditions of the brick needing tuck pointing. There were broken windows as part of this. The windows, again, here, single pane. The air conditioning condensing unit past the end of its life. I know the one at my house already is. We all have limped those things along like we've attempted, but that one is was rated not well compared to all of the other ones. Let's see, what else do we have in here for this one also, yes. Accessibility clearances. Not only was it the clearance issue that we had, it's also the doorknob. So this building, in the original Building A, that when it was upgraded in 2001, all of the doors end up getting door handles. So that's in part just to make it a little bit easier. If any of you have arthritis, I do. Turning a knob can be extremely difficult. That's why a handle is always much easier. That's why it's part of the accessibility code. This still has knobs on all of the doors. And the really odd thing with this building is the structural layout. So it has a combination of steel and masonry in it. So you have load-bearing masonry walls in the middle of the building and steel around the perimeter. So now any option you want to have to say, well, we've got the whole thing out, we'll open it up, and we could have office space in here. Well, now we have load-bearing walls in the middle, so that makes that a bit of a challenge. So this is a really challenging building to work with. The location is in a challenging spot relative to the parking. And it's a challenging building. We'll leave the Arts and Education building B as challenging. We have estimated a renewal cost on this at roughly $632,000. A replacement cost, if you were to build this same building, same square footage, in today's dollars, with today's construction, that would be roughly $4.2 million. So one note relative to renewal costs, that is not, it would take $632 to get this thing back up and running and take care of everything. That number reflects major items that would be part of a deferred maintenance project. So that would be all of your mechanical equipment. It would require roofing, windows, flooring in this case. Some cases we do not have the flooring as part of that, but the flooring is so bad here we didn't include that. And the other piece that is not included in that is any construction costs relative to the expansion and any alteration relative to toilet rooms to make them handicap accessible. We'll talk about sort of why that isn't included in the next building. The toilet rooms in this building are centrally located. In the next building, which we can go to now, is building C. This is the library. Just going to get a drink of water. So this building as well, no additions have been made to this. 1966 vintage. And there have been some superficial upgrades that have been made to the library. One of those was putting carpeting in the main library space. It appeared to our team that the reason for this was because this had the same issue that the Arts and Education building had, which is the flooring tile was starting to curl and peel from the floor. So the risk of having to pull that up and replace that and deal with potential asbestos issues, the easiest thing is to just cover that with carpet, and nobody has to touch that, and the carpet covers that. So the picture in the lower right is the one showing how now the carpeting, it's starting to telegraph through the carpeting, and it's pulling the carpeting apart. A lot of issues on this building, particularly with the sealant, the caulk that's around a lot of the windows, a lot of the soft joints, those are probably 10 years past the age that they should have been addressed. So there's a lot of conditions here where there's a lot of exposure to any kind of weather coming into the building. That's not to say this is the only building that has that issue, but it's just really well exposed on this building here. The image here on the lower left is a furnace. So this is also the case with building B.
Happy birthday, Pop.
Thank you. And so with building B and building C, the original drawings had indicated two massive, like short bus size air handling units on the roof. And if you've been out there and you're familiar, the copper roofing kind of comes up at an angle, and then in the middle of that building there's a tub, and that's where these air handling units were. We were expecting to go up the Skullway and find these air handling units to check them out. At some point, not on any drawing, we found out that that open-air scuttleway actually had been roofed over with a flat roof. The air handling units were removed, and the air handling units were replaced with large residential-sized furnaces. So that is not the most efficient manner with which to heat and cool a building. And the other, and the mechanical engineer on site at the time determined that the sizing of the mechanical units, of the furnaces, was likely based off of the size of unit that you could get up through the hole in the small ladder space that's there. We measured it out, it worked. So that's how we kind of got to that piece. So now instead of 2 regular sized air handling units, we've got 4 large residential sized units that are really working extremely hard to try to heat and cool that building. The major issue with this now, with that decision, is that any replacement of that is really, really limited, because now you either have to take those units apart with your Milwaukee tooling, unscrew every piece of sheet metal on that thing and take it down piece by piece, and then bring up the next piece up in there and try to rehook it up. Or the other option is to put a whole new, brand new air handling unit outside on the ground and then duct that up outside and try to get into the existing ducts. That was the one option. We were at dinner that night that we were like, how would we even solve that issue at the library? Well, that would be a likely solution, and that's not a really good solution to go with. So it was a very confounding matter that we came across. So that is one piece with this building. It also happens at, as I said, Building B, and those are the only 2 buildings, I believe, and I'm just trying to recall here, where that issue had happened, where they roofed over. I think it might have happened on Melville Hall as well. There's 2 furnaces up in there. So that's a very odd, peculiar piece with the modifications that were made mechanically with this. Again, the flooring is coming up, carpeting is coming up. The piece I was talking about with the accessibility. So bathrooms in this building, not accessible. They are on the outside of the building. So why can't we include a cost for, well, tell us how much it would cost to get these things to be accessible? The cost for that here, we would actually have to build out off of the building to build an addition to make enough room to get the clearances necessary to have that be an accessible bathroom. That is a number that can be generated, but for the idea of what a renewal would be, that exceeds that. Already at what we have here, the renewal cost just for the library is $1.17 million. The replacement cost for the library of this size would be roughly $6 million. So as we start going through that, just start sort of keeping a tally of what those costs are to just understand $1.7 million fixes some of the things. It doesn't fix the whole thing to make it a completely usable library that somebody could go in and just bring books. So I think we covered everything in this. We can go to the next slide with that. The next building that is on here is considered Building D. This is Melville Hall. This is the administration building. This is the building that had the addition put on towards the gymnasium in 1984, or 1998. I'm sorry. Just know that I'm looking up here. The addition is, I will say, just from a functional standpoint, the addition was really well done. So part of the issue that we had looked at with this is when we look at the original part of Melville Hall, that was specifically designed to be, I'll say, instructor, professor offices. They're really rather small, and they're really not up to any standard for what you would have today. If we were designing a new office building, those would be undersized offices. You could knock a wall up in between, and still the proportions of that, it would be a slightly odd office. So any kind of reuse of the additional spaces, the part that's closest to the Roadrunner Cafe or the Copper Top, that piece of the office is and it's also a double-loaded corridor. So you have a corridor going down the middle, and on either side of that corridor are these smaller offices. So to really make any kind of offices work in the original part of Melville Hall, it would require really almost gutting out that entire donut of walls and trying to reconfigure that to probably a single corridor with offices on one side. The other part with that that's kind of odd was the courtyard that's in the middle. At the time, the design, probably fantastic. It's now become a bit of a liability for the building, just because there's a lot of weather getting into that space, and there isn't a lot of accessibility for maintenance people to get into that space to fix those things. So there was actually one structural column that was coming down, I think attempting to bear on a piece of concrete, but the whole base of the column had deteriorated just due to rust because the water had just come down and taken that away. So I think any kind of major renovation in that space, that central piece, that central courtyard would have to be addressed as part of that design. The photo in the upper right, that is actually a condensing unit that was added to the project after the construction. That may, that I don't recall, I think that might have been at the same time as the 1998 edition that was added. I'm trying to recall our path up there in the conversation I had with our mechanical engineer. I believe so. I think he said that was 1998, that was added. And then so there are some pieces of mechanical equipment that are furnaces that are in this scuttleway, and then there is the actual condensing unit for the air conditioning that would be on the roof up there as well. Same items here where we've got cracks and sealant pulling away from the building by the windows, and any kind of soft construction joints on the brick. Windows in this, on the original piece, are still single pane sliding windows. And the photo in the upper left, that is of the railings that are going around there, that they're not actually to the proper height that need to be for ADA, for the accessibility code. Now, to go on the addition side, why is that more appropriate? The offices in there are 120 square feet, which is a standard office, 10 foot by 12 feet. And it actually lays out in a much more functional manner. It's just half of the building, and when they put that on, it appeared as though that the restrooms in the original building had gotten modified to become accessible. So that was like one really bright spot. Not on the plans, we go in there, we're like, okay, you have to check the bathroom. And it's like, whoa, these are so much bigger than what we had on the drawing. So that was one real beneficial piece that we saw as we were going through that building, and that was in the original administration building. I think we talked about most of everything here. Between the two buildings, we collected 113 total assets. Renewal cost for this is estimated at $739,000 to just build the same square footage as an office function would, in today's dollars now, are $7.95 million. I will just add this caveat to that replacement cost. Those numbers are as shocking to us as they are to you. Since COVID, we have seen nothing but construction costs go up in a vertical fashion that is absolutely alarming. And even putting costs like this up here it makes us nervous, just because it's like, I put that on there today, it could be over that by the time we put it up into a presentation. That's just the part where it's like, it's a very volatile market, so those kind of numbers for an office, while alarming, that is what the market rate is going for right now. We can go to the next building, which would be Building E. Building E is the cafeteria, the student center, and the theater building. This building, we collected 133 total assets. Again, very much the same pieces with this as with all of the other buildings, single pane glazing, accessibility issues. This, they actually modified, they addressed the accessibility issue. I believe it was likely for the theater with the location of it. There's a vestibule on the south side of the building that it's fairly large, and actually took part of that and created like a family restroom that's accessible, and it's right next to the men's room that are in there. And it was, again, one of these odd things. We have the original drawings, we're looking at it, and we're like, why are there 3 bathrooms here? We only see 2. And it's like, oh wow, somebody put one in the vestibule. That's a unique solution, and it works out well for the purpose that was needed, but it still does not address the accessibility issues elsewhere. There are a number of stairways that are too tight, doors that don't have the clearance that are needed. So there are, to make this again functional from where it stands today, there would be a great deal of investment that would be needed just to get everything up to be fully accessible. There was a water leak in above the music room at some point. A lot of the floor tile, much like the floor tile that we have in here tonight, is starting to curl. It's delaminating in a way, and that's coming up. So that I believe the roofing piece was addressed as far as we could see, but that damage has been done. The other items that we have in here are the air handling units that are up kind of between the music room and the theater area, if anyone's familiar with that. Those are still a lot of the original large air handling units that are in here. The room was probably maybe half the size of the room we're in today. And these things they're massive, they're taking up a lot of space. There are some new boilers up there. That was a positive thing to see. But the air handling units, they've been well maintained, but they are probably like 30 to 40 years past their life expectancy from what we would see with that. The kitchen was in pretty good condition, pretty fair condition with that. The equipment looked good, as we understood. There were deliveries still being dropped off last June for, even after classes had stopped. There were deliveries coming. There were still some things in the storeroom with that. And so that, I mean, everything we saw with that looked to be in good condition. A lot of these buildings, again, as the windows are, a lot of the doors on the outside, they're hollow metal frames, hollow metal doors, just due to the amount of salt that has to go down, especially for a university environment. Just to keep everybody safe, that does just a whole number on the doors and the frames. So we're seeing a lot of deterioration at the base of the doors, at the base of the frames. This building also had that. A lot of the soffits, a lot of that material is starting to come apart. That's the picture down here in the lower left. And for this, what we were seeing on a renewal cost was about $527,000. And a replacement cost for a theater and a student union would be roughly $11.9 million. We can go to the next slide. So the last building out on the campus is the gymnasium building. And we have on here also the central utility plant. Now that's not the central utility plant for the entire campus, but a good amount of mechanical equipment is housed on the south side of the gymnasium that's in there. A lot of that equipment that's in there is original vintage stuff from when that was built in 1966. Still working. It's still working. I think that's what I can say with that. The gymnasium building has it has a lot of the same issues. Again, it's kind of a common theme throughout here. A lot of the same issues as the other buildings, just because it's the same day, it's being maintained the same way. I would say the pieces that are different with this, it has this massive athletic floor, and the floor is in just extremely good condition. That's a very difficult thing to keep maintained as that way. And we actually took a break while doing the assessment and did shoot some hoops, just because we had to test the balance on the floor. And so that was good. The I mean, literally, we're going through, I think the athletic director's office, there are jerseys just like still there. And it was rather interesting because we're like, yeah, we could, just put those on and shoot hoops as well. But we didn't do that. That would have been a little odd. So anyways, we checked out all of the lockers and that. Those are all in really good condition. Where there was some issue were the doors between, it'll be the north side of the building there's like a pair of doors there between the gym and the Simon Center, if any of you are familiar with that. And again, those doors are in really, really bad condition. And our understanding in looking at how the flooring was inside those doors and the steps on the way down is that there must have been some kind of, well, there are a couple of things. Again, heavy salt use, which that is something that has to happen for safety. We recognize that. But then that's melting a lot of water. We get a warm day in winter or in spring, that water then comes in up to the door. The weather stripping hasn't been addressed. Water's coming in under the door, it's going onto the floor, down the steps, did not get to the athletic floor, thankfully, but was addressed in a later way. That was not a single incident that happened. That had been happening a number of times, and I think as that weather stripping on the door goes away, the threshold goes away, it just becomes exposed to any kind of water that comes through there. And the concrete, as you can see here, there's this picture in the lower left corner. That's a picture of the concrete that has started to settle around. That picture is actually on the west side of the building. It's actually a little bit more drastic on the north side of the building, where some of that water, or the slope is actually going towards the building. So it's just inviting that water to come in. And the picture on the upper right, those are the steps. What isn't being, the detail you're not seeing here is all of the nosing on the stairs, all of the vinyl on the front of the stairs is all coming apart because of that water coming through. Picture in the lower right, that's the original equipment. And the picture in the upper left, that is the roofing that's up there. So very unique situation, something I actually have not seen prior to going up there with Randy, and that was, it is a ballasted roof, and instead of being ballasted with stone, it's ballasted with insulation that has a granular cementitious cover on it. So it's really rather innovative in how that is, that insulation cement sandwich gives a protective layer to that membrane. So we weren't able to determine if the membrane is original to the building, but the membrane that was there was in really good condition. And all of those panels that are up there you can see some gaps in there just due to the UV degradation. The foam has started to peel away, but it did its job. It was really, really good. It's a sacrificial layer, and it was a really well-designed system for that. All of the flat roofs that are on that building are that way. So it has a good hat on that building. The other part of that building, there's the lobby area, the bathrooms that are in there, those two have accessibility issues. Those would have to be brought up to code with that. And the stairs coming in, the railings that are in there as well, not up to code for accessibility. There's a weight room to the south of the west entrance. The carpeting in there is all coming up. It's past the end of life. And then on the west side of that, of the south side of the building, is all the workshop where the mechanical equipment is. We collected 99 total assets on that project. Renewal cost, as it is right now, would be $1.89 million, not including the renovation for the accessibility components of that. To build a brand new gymnasium at that size, it would be right around $9.7 million. The one thing that we noted here is from a use standpoint, it really does function really well to keep that as a gym. It's hard to build a big open space that doesn't have many columns in there. So if there is, and because of the floor being as good as it is, a reuse of that purpose would be beneficial. And when you start looking at a renewal cost of that, yes, that's a lot of money, but when you think of the actual building cost being $9.7 million, that's an effective number to bring that gym up to a level if it were needed for any other purpose of some kind of gymnasium, physical training, whatever that would be. Next slide. So the next building, we have 3 left here. Now we're downtown. We're at the Health and Human Services building on Seminary. And this, as I'm sure many of you are aware, originally was a supermarket, and there was an addition, and it is the Human Services building now. Really, for the most part, accessibility not an issue here. As those additions happened, that really seemed to get picked up all the way along the way. One of the really great parts of this building, as we reflected after we did our analysis, is for the services that it's providing to the community and to the county. It's really in a great location. It's centrally located. It's really accessible from the standpoint of the parking is at the same grade as the door level, and anybody needing to get in there, even if you have any kind of device that you need to get in, if it's a cane, if it's crutches, whatever it is, it's a straight shot in there. That's actually hard to get in a lot of places. So that take that as being much more of a benefit for that building than it seems. So that was really great to see. We went on the roof. Yes, the roof, which then leads to the condensing units, which leads to the oddity of this building. This building has one really weird oddity, and that is there is no air handling unit for this building. A building of this size, you would expect more industrial size air handling unit. This building is heated and cooled with 14 residential furnaces, not big residential furnaces. It's the Lenox Day Labor Day sale residential size unit. It's the kind that we all buy for our houses. So there's a lot of ductwork, there's a lot of equipment, there's a lot of maintenance for each of these individual units. And then on top of that, you go up on the roof, which is why I thought of it, you go up on the roof and you have 14 different air conditioning condensing units up on top of there. So that's one of the pictures here down in the lower left. Those are, well, you can kind of see three of the units of the 14 that are up there. So our mechanical engineer was having a little bit of an anxiety attack. No, just I don't have 2 units. I have 14 units. Wow. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot here, and we had to trace them back to thermostats and everything to understand how that's all zoned. That is something that can be fixed, and that can be fixed by putting a larger air handling unit on there and working through the zones. The ductwork is already there. So from the standpoint of adaptability of this building, there's a lot of potential with this. I'm trying to believe, okay, so yes. So the other item that's here is, if you look at the picture in the upper left corner, you'll see what we call a split system or a PTAC unit, which is in the upper part of that picture. In the lower unit, that's a window-mounted air conditioning unit. I have no issue with the IT department in how this was done. I don't judge that. But that air conditioning unit, that is a window unit, is actually feeding from one of the other maintenance rooms that has 3 furnaces in it, and that is drawing air from that utility room, cooling it and putting it into the IT room where the county servers are. So this is literally everybody trying to do their best to keep the critical IT infrastructure cool. And on this particular day that we were there, one of the units was down, so the door is open, fans are in there, and that's a critical issue that really needs to be addressed. And there is a unit in there, a specific IT, they call it a crack unit, which is a computer room air conditioning unit. It was in there, that was down on that day. So it was like all hands on deck, and these 2 units that are in that picture just could not keep up with the amount of heat being generated by the servers that were in there. So hats off to your county IT department. They were getting the temperature, it was like a baby with a fever, and they were getting that thing down really effectively. So that was, but with that, that's a bit of concern in terms of that should have some level of backup for that, and what we're seeing in that picture is not something that is an appropriate level of backup. So we've noted that. The exterior of the building is an exterior insulation finish system, or it's called EFIS, and that is just what a lot of us would understand as being stucco. It's insulation, and then just kind of a synthetic stucco on the outside of it. Very effective material that was used for a long time in the 80s and 90s. Also found to be not draining, it did not drain water really well. So if you get moisture behind there, you get mold behind there, typically the insulation is mounted to some sort of wood sheathing. That sheathing can get rotten and bad things happen. Many lawsuits happen down in North Carolina and Georgia about that. The other part of it is repairing that is not the easiest thing to do. There are a number of vehicles that have run into that building and patches have been made, but it's a very flexible material, so it's very apt to have issues that occur to it. One of the pieces here again that we're seeing in the upper right corner, the sealant that is on the building, probably 5-10 years past its life, dried, pulled away from the material, now an open spot here for water to get into, water getting back there, not a good thing. The other part here, the picture on the lower right-hand corner, that is all the carpet. I believe this is, I think this might be in the finance area. What you're seeing there, the dark spots on there are not shadows. That's just the traffic pattern of people walking to and from their offices and that. Is that a critical item on a list when we're looking at things like the air conditioning into the IT room? No, that isn't a critical item, but it just goes to show the level of deferred maintenance that many of these buildings, including this one, have had over the course of time. Yes, and I'm looking at this here. So one of the things that we recognized as we started going through and looking at all of the spaces, so that building in particular, it had the growth of departments in that building happened very organically. And as a result of that, there are certain departments that you get the bulk of the department in this area, and then there are two people like over in that corner, somewhere over there. And it's not terribly efficient. And as we were going through and finding out more about the departmental use, we recognized that there's a lot of inefficiencies, just spatial, organizational, functional inefficiencies with this building. But there's a strong likelihood that this has, with just reorganizing spaces in that and getting departments where they need to be, right-sizing what everybody needs, this building is really super functional for the county. There's a lot of potential. It may not look like it. That is a really, really functional building. And the big part of that is what I had mentioned earlier with this building. It's that access from the parking lot. Everybody can get in there really easily, centrally located. It's fantastic that way. With this building, we collected 86 total assets. Renewal cost right now, we have at $444,800. And to build a like-size office of that square footage, $6 million. We can go to the next building. The courthouse. Not historic. Well, it is historic because it's old, but it's not on the historic register. We found that out and understand that to be not a limiting factor for the building. So that's an important piece. Along with that is, if it is on the historic register, there's a lot of additional pieces that go along with any kind of modifications that you would make to that building. With it not having that, there's some latitude that can be given for any kind of modifications that you would make to the courthouse building. So the finishes in there are, can't do it again like that today. Marble everywhere, and it's beautiful. The door hardware is incredible, the wood doors are incredible, every part of that is incredible. From a functional standpoint, it's got some issues. It's a big building, it's an old building, it has a massive foundation, and in the basement of the building, or the ground floor of the building, there are departments that are in there that are, it's almost like being in a maze, because like one department takes up 6 different rooms in one corner of the building. So very inefficient for an office type of use. And then as you go up the floors, there's a lot of load-bearing walls separating that building as it goes up. So like the DA's office is separated between like 3 different spaces. The clerk of courts has like, I think part of her office is actually in a vault. And there's just a lot of kind of quirkiness with a building of that age from a functional standpoint. The picture in the lower right, that is I believe, if I keep going through my memory banks, that is the only toilet in the courthouse, and that is in the judge's chambers, and it's actually in this, like underneath the stair that goes up to into the roof area, the roof cavity where there's some mechanical equipment up there. Very odd. There's a public door that goes in there. Not good at all if the judge is in there and the public are up there as well. The steps that you see in the upper left corner, those, I believe those were on the east side of the building. They are not, the height and they're not up to code, and not just accessibility code, just international building code. They're a little short, too short for that. The picture in the upper right is actually that is the air-cooled chiller for the building, and it's up in the roof, and you have to go over the entire building to go down, and the ladder is there that you need to get access to it. It's functioning from a maintenance standpoint. That's a real challenge, and that might be a case. I mean, it was a fine solution at the time. For regular, long-going maintenance, that will be a challenge. The other piece on the lower left picture here are some of the windows. They're just showing their age. I think we looked at some of the drawings, and there was a window replacement, I think, and maybe one of the supervisors may have to correct me, 1984, I believe the windows may have been replaced. That might have been later from that. But they are vinyl-clad wood windows. They are starting to show their age on the inside, and there has been some water damage on the inside as well. So there again, there's a likelihood of possibly needing window replacement on that building. When you drive by, you can look at how many windows are on there. I've counted all of them. There's a lot of windows on there. That will be a significant project, and that I will say that cost is actually reflected in this number as part of the entire building. Roof system, we were still verifying it today. Possibly 40 years old. I think it might be earlier. I'm not sure. If somebody knows that. We had drawings for when they redid the entire roof structure and the cupola of the bell tower. That was 1984, and that was when the roof was put on. We believe that has been replaced since that time. We weren't able to find any confirming information. If anybody knows, just yell it out.
No.
Be helpful.
Minutes.
Okay, thank you. And the office layouts, we talked about that. Just really the major issue with this is the accessibility of that building, and then the other top issue is the courtroom. So the courtroom, while big, while spacious, there are a lot of functional issues with how a courtroom should be. A lot of that is dictated by a Supreme Court ruling. It's Supreme Court ruling 68, and it states the size of the jury deliberation room. You should have a bathroom with the jury deliberation room. Where that should be, the size of the judges' chambers, how the courtroom, the size of the courtroom, which that is in compliance with because it is that big. But just a lot of the layout of that for the safety of both the victim, the witness, and the jury. There's a lot of technical issues with that, and a lot of pieces that really would need to be reworked for that courtroom to function in a much more safe fashion for both the jury, for the victim, for the witness, for the defendant, and for all the staff that are working in there. Yes?
Just want to point out one thing as well. If you're familiar with the courthouse, the first thing you walk into, there's no courthouse security. As you walk into the lobby area to get to any departments that you need, there's no space for any proper security measures. If you're looking at doing that, obviously that would be addition. So again, additional cost to look at that, or some major renovation, which would relocate a lot of other departments.
So, and yes, to Corey's point, that entry point for the court is that little building between the sheriff's office and the courthouse. If you've ever been in there, it's low, it's tight, and if you've ever gone through the airport or gone to any courthouses where they have the magnetometer, it's a process where you have to decombobulate, uncombobulate, recombobulate. There's combobulation happening in a hallway with equipment taking up a lot of space. And I can say magnetometer, I can't get combobulate on, so that part is the odd thing with that. So for the courts to get secure, imagine what all would have to go into that little space at the lower level of basically the administrative building and the court's facility of your county. So there's got to be an alternative option to that from taking up that space, to Corey's point. The other item with this, with the judicial space that we were saying, it's lacking roughly with the SCR 68 requirements. It's like roughly 10,000 square feet of required space. That's part of SCR 68. So the renewal cost and the replacement cost, when you look at that, it's actually tied to the slide after this for the jail and that. So the way we assessed it is because both of those buildings are combined, we reviewed them as one combined building, so that cost is shown for both. So we can go to the next slide with that, please. So the last piece of this is the most recent addition, and that was the 1982 addition for the jail, the addition onto the sheriff's office. It added administrative spaces on the second or third floor. I get that wrong every time, Candace. Is it the second floor? Third. Okay. The drawings had it differently, so that's why we have this like misunderstanding on my part. Okay, 82, and first thing, a couple of issues. We have the sheriff's office still operating and functioning in the original sheriff's office. In talking with the sheriff, it's working okay. You know, is it as efficient as a highly efficient office building? No, it isn't, but they're making their way go with that, and they've got it working. They've got the space that they need with that. If we move over on the other side, on the lower level, where the emergency vehicles would go, that's now patrol car storage in there, with the EMS vehicles moving to another location. Now on the back side of that, so this is on the east side of it, there are 3 different uses to that space. One door is the sally port, where anybody would be coming in, any suspect would be coming in who would be going through booking. They go in one door. Then the other door is a maintenance door, and then the other door is just sheriff's storage. It's all kind of connected through there, and it is really a very risky situation. We tend to have that sally port be a very secure space. How that's laid out currently is not secure. Well, I don't want to say it's not secure. It is secure. It's lacking a lot of the features that we would have in a jail that we would be putting together today. It was acceptable for the time that was built in 1982. It is not acceptable to what the Department of Correction standards are in today's statutes. So the other piece with this is that the jail level is, again, it's functional, but there are major components with the jail that are, actually, we're going to have Corey talk about the jail on this part. He's a little bit more adept with that.
So some things with the jail, other than the mechanical systems, electrical systems, plumbing systems, again, as Kyle mentioned, a lot of the existing jail does not meet current codes as far as building codes as well as Department of Corrections requirements. Yes, they are grandfathered, but there's certain conditions that actually make it unsafe for anyone who's detained as well as the officer that's escorting that person. Today's requirements from the Department of Corrections, cell sizes, how they're met, building codes, the cell sizes don't meet the current codes, as well as day rooms. Department of Corrections have certain square footage areas for each of these areas that's required, and again, they don't meet it. Also, as far as the corridors in the jail, they're very tight. Some of them are only 4 feet 6 inches wide. And so if you can imagine, if two officers have to escort somebody down that corridor to get into a cell condition, they won't be able to get them through it. If somebody gets combative, it's an unsafe condition for all parties that are into that area.
And to Corey's point, so if we look at the picture in the upper left, that is actually the picture, you can see that when you drive by on the west side of the building. It's like 7 air conditioning condensing units that are there, and then a transformer that are there. And typically those, because this is a mission critical facility, it's the sheriff's office, it's the jail, this thing's got to be up and running 24/7, 365 days a year. Those kind of pieces are typically in a secure location where a car can't just mishappenly run into it, or anybody can just walk by and be that close to it. Those are facilities that are mechanical units that are either up on a roof, inaccessible to you and I or anybody in the public. So a lot of sort of mission critical items that are kind of missed as part of the original design with that building. The picture in the upper right, that is actually in the top floor, in the roof area, in the mechanical chase up there, and the clearances up there are atrocious, to say the least. The mechanical units are as big as a camper, and 2 of them are squished into the top of that, and there's barely enough room for somebody to get an arm in between a wall and a mechanical unit to throw an electrical disconnect switch. You certainly could not wedge your way through there to get down the way to change a belt. Our team was really rather shocked when they went up there to see how tight that was and just the clearances that are up there. The picture down in the lower area, the lower right, that just shows some of these, there is some cracking in the brick, and it's gone into the precast, which is above the windows, and overall there is some cracking of the brick. On the outside, the windows are, they're in moderate to fair condition. They're 30 years old, so it's, actually they're 40 years old, so it's just, they're at the end of sort of that existence if that deferred maintenance is not being taken care of. The real part here, as Corey was saying, in doing the analysis, the jail space area, the jail proper, not including the sheriff's office, it's like roughly 7,700 square feet. If we were to build a jail for a county of this size for that type of capacity, we would be looking at a building of roughly 55,000 square feet. And that is going to Corey's point relative to the standards that the Department of Correction have, relative to the size of cells, all of the other spaces that would go with that, the accessory spaces that are required for a jail. The administrative offices, they're up on the 3rd floor. They are, the layout of them is not that great. There could be some efficiencies that are there. We feel like there's probably roughly 2,400 square feet of space that's needed in there. And just relative to how those spaces were laid out and how departments took those spaces over as the county organically grew into those spaces. The other major issue is with both of these buildings, we'll leave it with 2 more here. One is the county boardroom, and that is a space that actually is connected to the sheriff's office by a door, and it's also connected to the administrative building by a door and a ramp. And that actually is an exit way out of the building, and that should not be that way. Like, that is not up to code today, and that is not an appropriate way to have an assembly space where we could have a number of people in there. So that was one major oddity relative to that building. The other piece are the bathrooms, not accessible, and to get them to become accessible would require a fairly major renovation, because the fixture count for how many fixtures you need for the amount of people in that building has changed since that time when that building was designed. So it isn't just adding another fixture in a room, it would literally be wiping out all of those fixtures. And where once a women's room and a men's room were, it may just be one gender, a bathroom for just one gender with that. So that was that. So from a renewal cost standpoint, we've estimated that at $555,000 for the renewal cost. And the number for the replacement cost, which, mind you, this is including sheriff's office, administrative offices, brand new courthouse, courtrooms, and jail, would be $69.5 million. So that would be essentially like an entirely new justice center. That would be taking what is there currently and the functions that are there and replacing that with what would be jail, sheriff's office, and courts, which would be considered a justice center. I just realized I've been talking for 2 hours. I really appreciate all of your patience in going through that. 1 hour? It started at 7.
Started at 6, it said.
Feels like I've been talking for 2 hours. Woo! Oh, it's the clock on there, yeah. It's Eastern time. Okay, with that, I believe that's the last slide, correct? That is the last slide. So, 15 minutes for questions and answers, and we should, yeah. For anybody online, we can take the microphone.
And we do have a microphone up here. We'd ask you to come up and use, please, so that everybody can hear you and the people online can hear you too if you want to ask questions. Again, questions for our presenters about the information they've shared with us tonight.
Consider this like the annual checkup, going to the doctor and getting the full scan, okay? That's what our team did, and we were able to kind of get the unvarnished look of the entire thing. So I think we have one person here who's either looking to ask a question or had me. Thank you for coming, sir.
There was one thing I wanted to ask you about.
Yes, David.
In relation to the campus property and the mechanical stuff in the gym building that distributes, there's a lot of power distribution stuff in there.
Yes.
What was your assessment of that type of stuff?
Yes, so there too, that a lot of that was original, and I'm trying to think of when we went back to how we had rated those. I think because those were original, and I couldn't pull it up right now, they're old, we'll say that, and electrical equipment doesn't have an infinite lifespan. So it would likely need any reuse of that space, and I'm speaking as an architect, not as an electrical engineer. I would expect any major reuse of that space would likely require the upgrade of a lot of that electrical gear and the switches that are in there. A lot of what I found with buildings of this age is the parts that you need to replace, the breakers, sometimes it's still like, it'll be a fuse in some cases. Those are, like, the only place you can find those are on eBay, and a lot of maintenance people, there's like a little group on eBay that just swap electrical parts because that's the only way they can find them. So that would be, I would assume the likelihood with that. I can come back with a more official answer after I confer with our electrical engineer on that. But because it is over 50 years old, electrical gear is not meant to function that long in that fashion.
And so that wasn't part of your estimated scope for the renewal?
I have to check on that. I will have to look at that, and I'll make sure that we have that in there as part of it.
Thank you. We have other folks who want to ask questions. Dale, come on forward, please. You make sure your mic is on here.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me?
How about now? Okay. I'm not going to try to adjust anything. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is I think the county board and the county board chairman deserve our gratitude for dealing with this situation in a comprehensive manner. I am just stunned at the complexity of the situation we find ourselves in, and I am well aware of the difficulty that the county board has had with the resources that have been offered it. And I think all of us feel for the local taxpayers, it's a tough road to hoe. But having said that, I guess what I'm left with is, well, how do we fix this? And it's a good thing that you have done as much as you've done with counties. I have to believe that we're not unique, that other counties have probably at some point faced similar situations, and I'm wondering if you can now or in the future give us some ideas that would allow us to address this, because the county board doesn't have an ability to make money. We're going to have to deal with it within the financial constraints of the county. There's some flexibility, but you can't get blood from a stone, and that's kind of how I think a lot of taxpayers feel. So any advice that you could give us at this point that would help us, county board and general public, begin to think about how do we address all this would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, and Dale, correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much for your question, your comments. I do want to say, one of the things, in working with many counties, we're fully aware of just the limitations, the financial limitations counties have on them, both from a tax levy standpoint and from a water levy standpoint, and how those are mutually exclusive items, and how one can affect the taxpayer more impactful than another. So we're aware of that. And moving forward, the next steps that we have is we are meeting with all of the departments, the staff, finding out what their needs are, what the spaces that they have are. Now that we know what is here, we can then begin to know, is that the right, if you want to sit down, you can. I don't want to hold you up here like I'm addressing you directly, but I just wanted to say thank you, Dale, for that question. So it's finding out what's the right size for these departments, what's actually needed to be there, and then what is future growth for a lot of these departments that are there. A big part too is looking at the needs for the sheriff's office, for the jail. What are the impacts statutorily for a lot of these things? We're working with a number of counties where they have similar jail conditions or jail situations where they're actually in a place where they have to do something about their jail immediately, otherwise state statutes and the Department of Corrections will be stepping in. So we recognize the magnitude of all of this. We recognize the funding that is here with Richland County, and that any improvement of any magnitude that we've either put up on the screen or anything is a major hit. And what we will do is, as we start going through with Candace and the rest of her department and all of the department heads, we will begin to identify, okay, here are all of these items and here are costs. We'll look at it first with the costs there, and then we will begin to go through a process of identifying the right way this can be planned and phased in a manner where everybody isn't just socked with something that is wholly inappropriate. Now that is a completely, I just have to say that statement is extremely subjective to everybody, correct? Me getting socked, David getting socked, Corey getting socked, they're all different kinds of pieces with that. But we do recognize that the impact for Richland County and the Richland County constituency and the residents is anything is impactful with that. So we will take that into consideration through this. Do we have another question? Please go forward.
My question and comment is directed specifically to the Richland County Courthouse. You mentioned that it does not have at this time historical status, but it represents to the people in Richland County the sandstone work, the marble work, the sweeping stairways, and the craftsmanship that has gone into that building. It's like we're called Richland County, and the courthouse reflects that rich land that we have, and the marble steps that you showed there have the wear
Yes.
of people that have locked up our ancestors to get their wedding certificates and licenses. And it's the beauty of the courthouse, I think, when we're making our decisions, should reflect the history of the people that created the county and respect the beauty and the aesthetics and the craftsmanship of the courthouse.
Absolutely, and your comment is not at all lost on us. That is, you have one of the most beautiful courthouses in the entire state, and every time we get to come here, it is really, as just an architect, a complete joy to see that, just the different colored marbles, like you were saying on that, the green and the gray at the column base and everything. We will look for the proper use and the appropriate reuse of that space. And we'll have to look, and if that reuse isn't within county use, is it something else that could find a really great home in there that is within the county that needs a space? Is it a nonprofit? Is it something like that? But I mean, we will try to do things to find that use that is appropriate for
And
that.
also, is there an avenue to pursue historical status?
There are avenues with that. That was not part of the original assessment, but that would be another additional step that could be looked at in the future for the county.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Would you explain the government process that's going to happen at this point?
Well, our process tonight was to get the information. We've gotten a lot of information, we have some data, we have some staggering numbers to consider, and we will have to have a lot of conversation moving forward, taking into account lots of factors, not just the money. The numbers they've given us are to renew the structures as they exist, but do those structures even function if they were in better condition for what we need them to do? A historic courthouse is a beautiful thing, but if it doesn't actually function for the court, what do? Those are things we're going to have to consider. There'll be a lot of conversation. Again, sometime in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a campus reconfiguration committee meeting to start talking about, okay, where do we go from here? What are our next steps to consider? What do we want to get involved with? Originally, we had anticipated a process where we would solicit proposals for the campus property. Well, given what we've learned tonight, I personally, myself as county board chair, I wouldn't feel comfortable just handing that property over to somebody. It needs so much work before it could even be used for its current purpose, right? So we're gonna have to talk about those things. We're gonna have to consider all the impacts, consider finances as one issue, our needs as another issue, and certainly the wishes of the community and the public as we talk about all these things. It's not gonna be a quick decision we're gonna be able to make. And while we're considering that, we also have to make sure the county government continues operating. We have to live in the courthouse building right now and keep it functional right now. Are there things we have to do immediately? So those are some of the things we'll talk about. We will definitely keep the process open. We want to continue to get public input. Right now, we can't answer a lot of questions because we've just gotten our first set of real information to deal with. And that was our purpose for the meeting tonight. Does that help? Any other questions for us? Yes, Mary.
Are you staying with us through this process? Is this what I get from this, and how long of a time frame are you allowing yourself?
Yes, so we are now from the facility assessment side, we're going through the master planning process, which that was the piece that I mentioned earlier, where we're meeting with all of the departments, finding the square footage they have currently, the square footage they would need, and then what would be a projected future state for that, what that would look like. So we're producing that right now. There will be options that are part of that. Then we'll take those square footage numbers. So now think of it as, okay, this is, I'll use the example of me and my family in our little 900 square foot house, where it was like, okay, it was great when we had one kid and a dog, but then when child number 2 came, it got to be really cramped. So now, what else do we need for this size family to go forward? We will begin to project that out, what that is. That's the next step. And then it's, okay, how do we start getting Richland County on a path to get there through all of these pieces? As David had said, a lot of these things may have to stay in their current space for a period of time. No one's going to get everything new right away. There's no county that can afford that. So how can we get a very deliberate and focused path that both your board and future boards, because this makeup of this board will change every 2 years, how can we provide that path forward? So at the end of this, our deliverable will be that roadmap to how Richland County can grow into its needed space, wherever that ends up being.
What about the buildings or the campus? What is your next thing that you're going to do for us with that?
That's a great question. So part of what this next level of analysis will be is on identifying what the square footage, as we talk about, okay, we'll just say veteran services or the AERC has X amount of square feet of office space and clinical space that they may need. Is there any other place that could fit within the properties that the county owns? And does it make sense to move there to begin to go through that process? And it's kind of, it's like building a puzzle in a way, and then maybe we can fit these departments in this space, but none of these are appropriate. They just don't work in that way. Or we can fit them into this space, but it's going to cost roughly $1.5 million to get this up to a level where it can be a functional office for them to be in. Those are the pieces that we're going to be working with your staff on to figure that out. I will go back to Dale. You had made a comment relative to applauding your county board. I want to applaud you for making that acknowledgement, because as we work with a lot of counties in the state, I can honestly say Richland County is far, far, far ahead of so many other counties in what you are doing today. And that includes the counties, many counties that we are either working with or are in touch with that have a UW campus on it that either has been eliminated or may in the future be eliminated. Many of them are doing this all on their own, and they're not looking for any help. And what your county board has done here is the appropriate way to do it. It's having the assessment, finding out what you have, and understanding that. Once you know what you have, we can find out how much is it going to take to get to what we need it to be, and then finding out, does it even fit with what we need? Those are all things that your board, once they have that information, they will be able to make confident, informed decisions that when you, as any of the county residents, go and ask them, hey, why are we doing this? They'll have that information. We can't move it there because it just doesn't make any fiscal sense with that, but it makes far more fiscal sense to do this. Or they can say we can do a complete reuse of that space because it does make fiscal sense for us to do that. So your county is really so far ahead of the curve with this, and I just want to acknowledge that. We've worked with that quite a bit, and this already started a year ago when they had started the process of putting the RFP up. So they're doing it the right way, and I think all of you should be very proud of the process that they're taking us through.
I'm glad we're ahead of the curve, because it still feels like we got a long way to go. And just me personally, the biggest lesson I've taken away from tonight, deferred maintenance does not save money at all. Deferred maintenance is, I want to pay 4 times as much for this someday in the future, apparently.
I noticed did you address the electrical systems of these sites, or are those up?
We did, yeah, our our electrical engineer did review everything, and that is a part of the information that we collected. I may not have, I clearly identified all of them in here. The architect was left to put the PowerPoint together, so I'm sure if I gave this to our electrical engineer, he'd be like, hey, where's the switchgear for this one? Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, there are in there. There are some that, what I can say, because much of that hasn't been upgraded over the course of time, it's still part of that 1966 vintage. So I will say this, the good part is it was all built at the same time. It's all pretty much the same product. It isn't like you have 5 different products that are in there and then you're just chasing your tail trying to find the right thing to put in the right building. So, but it is old, and much of that likely would need to be upgraded for service.
Any other questions here as we're kind of running towards our limit of the Q&A time?
Is there a timetable for the next steps we can do?
Timetable for next steps, other than to say in a couple of weeks we'll have a campus reconfiguration committee, that's as much as I can give you right now. We've got to get all this information, start digesting it, and as I said, so many other factors we have to consider: dollars, space needs, what realistically could you do with things? When you look at the campus property, maybe you do something to the library building, but it's, like a 3-block walk from a parking place to that library building. So how useful is it if you're going to repurpose it for something? That's something we got to figure out, right? So all those kinds of questions. And of course, fixing the bridges out at the campus, which we learned are deficient, and we couldn't really responsibly bring any heavy equipment across them in their current state to even try to do something major to buildings. So we've got those to address. It's going to take time, so we ask for your patience, and we thank you for your support and your interest. And if you have further questions as we go along, certainly feel free to contact us. Thanks to Candace for putting this together, and the support of all our administrative team as they've worked with Venture. And thanks to all the board members who've taken the time to listen and learn, and they've been through meetings and talking to people, and are shouldering, the decision-making that's going to happen here in the future. So, any final questions? Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I'm used to a microphone, thank you. My question goes out to both of you two, that as you progress and have these meetings with staff, with directors and everything, will you have any more public information sessions like this to keep us up to date on what's going on?
I would say that's highly likely. We will certainly, public is always welcome to attend our regular meetings that we have, and at the time that we have major issues to discuss again, we would certainly seek to have a public forum like this where we can get lots of folks together so everybody can hear all the information at once and get the same info that we're dealing with and participate in discussions. So I would say it's highly likely. Can't tell you when or exactly what it would be, but yes, highly likely. All right, anything else? Well, again, thank you all so very much for your time tonight. Thank you to those who tuned in online. We appreciate you as well. Have a very good evening and stick with us. We'll get through this.
Thank you very much for coming.